So I want to talk about presets real quick. I've got two main ones that I use, honestly, and the interior one, I don't have an interior shot up here, but we're going to go over the preset. So this preset, I've got it labeled, I put the year on there, interior, no contrast. And I do these as a baseline because I'm almost always going to touch the exposure, the shadows, and under the tone curve here on region I do darks. But anyway, it's really helpful to use these presets. I've got the exposure at 0.71. Again, on interiors, I've got the highlights pulled all the way down. Every once in a while, and I mean rarely, on an interior, if I'm wanting to brighten up some walls or something, I'll start to bring that up, but it usually stays pulled down all the time. And then the shadows are lifted out to plus 21. I knock the clarity up to plus 10. I do not do saturation indoors because it throws off the colors of the walls and other things, and it's just not worth it. So case by case, but I very rarely, I don't know if ever nowadays, that I'll mess with saturation indoors. Coming down, I'll have my darks to negative 13, and then I do my sharpness here to 68, and the detail to 43. And for my interior preset, that's it. And then I go back through and I touch those three sliders and adjust the distortion. And then I have one that's for outdoors, which is outside sharp grass. And it will almost, the majority of the time, it will come in just a touch dark, which I'm fine with, because outdoors, it's better just to kind of start darker and then again say, okay, where's my high, where's my low, and find that middle ground. It does have the contrast up a touch. Lately, I've been taking photos and getting with that low contrast, but again, the preset starts with a plus 5. The highlights are all the way down. The shadows are plus 36. The clarity is plus 19. I have vibrance and saturation just one notch on both. And then the darks, again, is negative 13. And then outdoors, I've got the green pulled down, because it's just it's a lot brighter in its natural state, and so I bring it down on the preset to negative 20. I don't normally, on aerials, I'll adjust the greens, but on shots like this, I almost always leave it alone because that's where it needs to be. It darkens them up and makes the bushes look more healthy. And then sharpening to 75, detail to 44. And that is that for the preset. Okay, so we're going to start looking at interiors. And interiors have a lot of little things that can pop up, but again, they're all usually handled pretty much the same way. The most important part is being consistent, because delivering these interior photos in a way that keeps the clients happy is like the most important thing here. You can get creative and say to yourself, oh yeah, that looks great, but if it's not what the client is used to getting regularly, then all they see is something that feels different, and we don't want that. So anyhow, the same sliders, exposure, shadows, and darks. When I'm doing my shadows here, I'm completely changing this wall tone. I'm changing the color of the TV a lot of times, and in this case this dark cabinet. But it's not so dramatic that I would, be wrong. In this case, really anywhere through here. I mean, that's pretty wrong because that TV looks like crap. But, bringing some color. It's also affecting this wood here and this wood down here. Not super bad, but it is. So anyway, I feel like that is probably a good temperature for everything. And then we go here. Do the same thing. Again, we don't want to mess with these wall colors too much by getting too deep. And we don't want to be out here where everything looks real hazy and blown out. So usually you knock it down a touch. Again, the preset's at -13. And it makes everything solid again, which is what I always like to say. So we do that. I'd say the color and everything looks good there. If I'm indoors, I'm going to be on 10mm. If I'm not on 10mm and you see an indoor shot, I'll be totally zoomed into something showing how nice backsplash or something looks. So the point is, when you come down to distortion, you're almost always going to at least click +5 or +10. You basically watch these frames, watch the rails, and see what it does to them. And then, we start hitting vertical. It stands these guys up, and then we can twist it into place where we've got everything looking like it's standing up. So that looks really good. So this is where, let's see, you would look down. Let's see if I can do this. Oops. You would look down and see that I have several exposures. Oh, I'm going to lie to you. I have several exposures of that bedroom. I did one of this. What I was going to say, normally I would take this picture and I would take another one right behind it. So let me just skip all that talk and I'll deal with this room. Paste. Do interior. There comes a point where you can only make a room so bright, and again it starts looking kind of washed out, and that's something I'm really against. And even as you bring this down, that's what the room could look like if you're standing in it. It doesn't look horrible as a picture. Matter of fact, that's realistically more what the room did look like standing in it. So I want to knock it up a little bit, which you can start to see all this area in here getting brighter. It just makes the room feel a little bit cleaner and brighter in most cases. In this case, I could have probably stood to shoot a different exposure. I mean, the goal is when I shoot a lower exposure of the same room is to make sure that the objects outside are showing through the window. Everybody loves when they can see through the window. And the reason is when most people take a picture on their own, they don't see through the window because they're not shooting auto bracket on a high-end Canon camera with a wide-angle lens. But we are, and I've got control over this exposure, and so that's my goal. Is just to make these photos look better than what they could produce. So let's see here. We're back to messing with these darks. It's too dark. I still feel like that's a little washed out, but what are you going to do for this room? It doesn't look horrible. That's the funny part about all this. Nobody else knows that this room could also look a little bit more like that. And I don't think anybody's looking at that photo going, dang, that's washed out. But I know the difference, as far as deciding when my final product, where my final product is on that photo. So you'll see stuff like this. Like there was a kid in this room. I hit delete on my keypad, on my keyboard here, and then I hit enter. So this is what I was trying to say earlier. You see the multiple exposures, and then boom, look, those pillows disappear. Like, unless there's something weird about that photo, that's the one we're going to go with. Took those out in this backpack. Usually I'll wait to delete that, but in this case, we're good. Interior, wow. And look at this big blue flare right here. That thing's crazy. I've been leaving them. Oh, and then we've got 2 big green flares up here and another circle flare there. So let's take a look at this. I'm gonna get my exposure going, because in this room I'm able to get real bright and it's looking nice. We were way down there, so we get real bright. And this is a perfect example. You'll see it in here and in kitchens. These dark woods. You start messing with this shadow slider. Boom! Look at that. And sometimes I like to make the floor look dark. Why not? You don't want it looking like that. That's for sure. So anyhow, I'm finding a balance between making the floor not looking like it's a black hole down there, and not getting too, pulling too much of the color out of the wood. So I'd go with maybe about here, because it made this look nice too. And then let's see, we got a couple things to do here. Always going to make our adjustments. So I've done rooms like this 100 times, right? At least. So I laugh because photo set could be 200. So I've done rooms 1,000 times, and that's kind of the regiment. +5 to +10, +5, and then twist it so that this line in the middle looks right. I'm gonna have a whole thing on how to remove flares. These guys can be real tricky sometimes. And so it takes, I have a couple different techniques for removing these flares. It's not the same every time by any means. There we go. And I tell you, I make it look easy. There's still some green in here. We'll see how it looks. Yeah, you can see a little bit of it. Big round flares, I leave those a lot of times because here's another one. And another one. People are used to seeing those types of things on movies, and so it's not a huge distraction. This isn't great. There's some stuff coming that's off this window pane here. That's all off of this window pane. I don't know if you see this square here. So when it comes to what's going on with this curtain, there's a lot of different ways to try to fix that. You could try to take the spot removal tool and, basically it goes all the way out to here, and try to start messing with it. Getting it to duplicate some of the other drapery. It's just, that would be a big mess. I mean, you could do it. It'd take a while, but it would look like crap. You'd have all these lines. It just doesn't work. So another thing that can be done, aside from just leaving it, which may be what we do, is to kind of color it in, which again makes for a mark, but the goal is to take any unnatural color out of there, which is that like bluish purple. And let's see if we can, it's almost a white. See, it turned blue. And I would rather, I've done this before, I kind of turn the yellow up. It kind of makes it a white color, like this white that's coming off of here. And increase the exposure. I would rather it look like that than blue. You see, I'd rather have there be a blown out window with kind of a blown out flare coming through here than let it be blue. There's a pretty dramatic difference on a photo. There's that. It's dark. And now it's not. I think we're all set on that one. And then here's another example I happen to notice. We've got 2 exposures. That's the darker one. And that might be too dark. So again, I'll come in here and I'll apply the preset to both and see if this one's going to come up and look real nice. Because again, the reason I do it is for this outside windows, just to make it come through even more. So when I do an auto bracket at a lower stop, it causes these the light outside the window to shine through a little bit better. But as I mentioned, it changes the area of the focus of the light. I mean, look at that. There's all this light in the floor. There's all this light on the ceiling. And I come here, and all the light is on the ceiling and near the windows. In this case, I think this looks way better. So, pretty easy judgment call. I'll just delete the other one right out of the bat. Or right out of the gate. Or off the bat. So there's that. You can see that this room is leaning to the left. And like one of the first things I'm going to fix. Stand that hutch up. Talking about this. Yeah, that was leaning way back. Do that. And the other thing it does is it does this door. This is from vertical. There's that. And then if that door looked bowed or anything, I would hit the distortion 1 more to 10. Which I'm not against. You know, I'll leave it there on that one. I don't know. It's making this one look a little funky. Alright, so I left it at 5. The rotation looks pretty good. You know, I sit and twist it around a little bit like I do the exposure and the shadows. Just see where it looks like the tipping point is and see what looks most natural. You know, the table's starting to look weird over here. So, you know, we flatten this out. You know, I didn't continue adjusting this either, so yeah, like we don't want these washed out floors here, right? So instead of letting the floors be washed out, we bring some color back to them. And that includes this wood and the wood on the table. Say that's about fair. Okay. Made some changes there. I think that looks really good. So same room, nothing wrong with hitting copy just to see what's going to happen when you paste it, and that's way too bright. You know, one of the reasons I like to show that. Now I would still adjust this photo, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not crazy about it. Excuse me, just because of this, all these little flares, but you know, I don't want to just deliver one dining room photo. So let's see what we can do with it. Do kind of the standard stuff. This is a mess. So I'm going to go I do heal instead of clone. There we go. It's another thing that, believe it or not, I didn't realize is you can... I would just take a circle and click it. I didn't realize I could take this like a paintbrush and paint it when I was dealing with the spots, but you can. So I still see some green in there. I can actually go over it again to take that out. And then using corners or adjusting in a corner can be a little tricky, so I try to make that spot as small as possible. Okay. Now sometimes I'll leave parts of these if it's just real obvious what it is, but in this case it's not so obvious, and I have a lot of wall here that is of the same color without obstruction. I like to leave this part for itself, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Instead of going all the way across to that door frame, sometimes it can be a little tricky to find for the heal tool to go and find another part of the door frame and a piece that goes out all the way that far. So I leave just that for itself. I'll do the same with this one. Like, here's just the door frame part. Find a match, make sure it adjusts okay, and then deal with the rest of the flare. Oops. There we go. So you can see it's still just a little bit splotchy in there. These look a little, you know, a lot like just regular flares, like the small brown ones. But I can go back over some of these spots and lighten them up so I don't have so many. So there's that one, that helped. There's this one, which stood out to me. So I'm just gonna go over it again. So that's that, and then I'm gonna paint over this as well. That's a big spot. I don't know if... Oh, no. I don't know if I'll have an area. Might have to redo that one. Let's see. No, we got lucky. And it helped. Yeah, so now it just looks like some big round flares there. Which is pretty natural and normal to be coming off of a big chandelier. So, that photo's not done, but there's the adjustment. You know, all of this junk that was in here is gone. I don't think I messed with the light in here at all yet. Yeah, it's such a natural place for that slider. I mean, it lands there all the time and I'm not looking. So that's that photo right there. I may see if I can get a little bit brighter just by a touch. And then sometimes I'll click back and make sure that they match. You know, this is the dining room. The last thing in the world I want is this photo to not look at least similar to this photo in color tone. So that looks nice. And then we've got this kitchen. Several kitchen shots. And it doesn't look like any of them have a white balance issue. So there's my darker exposure right there. And you can see a little bit of a difference outside. And apparently I left it on dark here. Yeah. So that's, sometimes I'll do that. I'll kind of preview what I've got coming up, just so I know. And we're back in the kitchen. You know, these have white cabinets. A lot of times you have dark cabinets and some type of wood, and so the wood flooring and the colors can get real tricky in a kitchen. And I tell you, they get tricky in a kitchen and tricky in a bathroom because people, I guess, I don't know if they just sell different lights technically. You know, there are more lights in those rooms, but like you get these weird blues and yellows off of these lights sometimes. This kitchen's looking pretty good though. So it looks like my shadows affecting my countertop. You know, this is blowing out, washing out and blowing out my floors. And then I'm going to figure out what's going on with this right there. So there you go, plus 10, plus 5. And a slight little rotate. And I mean, that looks, look at that. That looks really good. So maybe knock it up a notch. So this, again, I don't ever want to forget doing this. You copy, I'm in the same room, same colors, paste. It's going to get me, I mean, that looked pretty close. So, like, I can tell that it's probably not a whole lot needed in the way of the sliders. I'm still going to mess around with them. You know, it's another good time for you to look at what your number was before you start messing with it. This is a -9. You know, all of a sudden I start getting out of whack. I'm like, oh, where was I? You know, where was the number? Say -9 is about right on. So, and I'm end up a -7 no less. So, let's see. Should we adjust for the distortion? That'd be about it. May not be any rotation. It sure looks like there needs to be, but then when I do it and I look over, it was at 0. Yeah. .4. 0.3. So that's that. We got lucky. There's no flares coming off of these lights up here. There's no crazy flares coming off of these. I'd like for this to be a little bit darker, but it is what it is. So move to the next one. Hit paste, which looked pretty good. It made everything look a little bit more vibrant at most. Knock this exposure up. And you see I'm still messing with these sliders. Even though I hit paste, I still want to see what these are going to do to the photo, especially in appliances, black appliances. And set -9 again. But you know, the best part is if you don't see a big difference, you know what looks good already. You can just go right back to it. So normally you won't do this upper distortion so much, but if you're watching the edges, like right along these edges here, 5 doesn't totally do it, or 10. Look like more like 10 or 15. It looks like I got vertical on location, so that's a 0, and may not have to do much with this. Again, I've been trying really hard to nail it in the field. I think that that looks better. So we had some rotation. Which caused me to then be able to do this to get this straight up and down. But we're not, that rotation is making it where this wall isn't leaning as far over. So there's a good kitchen shot. Not night and day difference, but definitely a difference. Obviously we're leaning off to the right here. Hit paste. Immediately up the exposure because I know we're going to be at least higher. And then I'll rotate this. Okay, you see this wall that just bent back into shape? Okay, so we've got this living room and get things straight. Everything looks pretty good in here. When I'm doing the vertical, I'm looking at this line, which I can always eliminate. I can always crop that out and crop that if I wanted to, if it looked real funny, and sometimes it does. If I don't have my camera pointed the right way, these walls right here look really funny. Sometimes you just crop them out. I try not to do that because it gives it that dimension as though we're looking into this room. But I also look at this. Look at this big line down the chimney. This big line. That's what helps me decide on what needs to be done. You can see these lines in here acting up, but my first goal is to take this bow out of here. You see how it's bowed, and that photo, it went to 15. And then to figure out whether or not it makes sense to even mess with vertical, which it usually does, and +5 is typically where I'm at with that. So that looks good. Let's see what, I want to keep this a little bit dim because the way the light's coming through those skylights, it gives it some depth. But again, I also want this to look nice and bright and clean. What that is? Oh, those are those lines off the floor. Look at that. No biggie. It's almost a vignetting effect where it's getting dark around here and all this light's in here. So anyway, that looks really good. So we're back in the same room. I look back at the kitchen. So I'm going to take this. And I always try to copy it if I can, in the same room. Yeah, so I brought all that light in over here. There's another tool that you can use. It's a gradient filter. And again, I keep my stuff set on dark so I can see what it's actually applying itself to, and then I bring it back to the other direction. I don't need to do that in this room, but sometimes you need half the frame to be a little bit brighter. Again, I wouldn't really do that in this room. You got to reactivate it by clicking this button here. And if you hover over the button, it'll show you in red how it's been applied. I'm going to take this out. And I'm okay with it because it forces you to look this direction into the room, which is what we want. And it doesn't look horrible. So, I might give it a little bit, just a little bit, do about like there, and bump this up a touch, like that. This is going to be what I'm looking at, and these lines when it comes to my vertical on this one. And kind of what's going on with this fireplace, but I think that looks good.